This conference will now be recorded.
Till now, we discussed about different concepts in modular programming, or you can say procedural programming. Do you have any questions on those concepts? Or we are good to jump to a different programming language called object-oriented programming. Can I assume there is no questions?
Yes, Amma.
So, what is the reason we need to jump into object-oriented programming when most of my problems can be completed by procedural programming? Why should I go for object-oriented programming? Does anyone have knowledge on Java? OOPS concept.
I have
What is the purpose of OOPS in Java?
class constructors.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
No, those are the concepts or features within the class object. Constructors, destructors, all these are you can say features of your class. But why should I go? The assignment I informed you, I can complete it, which I shared you. I can fulfill with the help of modular programming, and I also can fulfill with the help of object-oriented programming. When I able to complete by object-oriented programming, sorry, procedural programming, why should I go for OOPS concept?
If we want to put together, then we need some programming, right? Like we are
That
creating small functions and methods, but everything needs to be in one place.
that is library is there, no? In procedural. The functions are there or can be maintained in your modules can be maintained in your library, so one library is good enough to call.
And sometimes we don't need all the things, right? Only few of the things.
You can call only that the function or a module which you want to be called. In a math function I have hundreds of, in a math module I have hundreds of functions, but I can call the function which I want. Math module dot the function name. The reason is there are two reasons. The main reason is security. So the person who can call the function called square, he can also call cube. So there is no restriction. Every user can access every function within the module or within the library. Are agreeing with that? Once, but when coming to reality, especially when coming to web authentications or self authentication programs or GUI, security will play vital role. Where when you're coming to the previous programming, procedural programming, we are failing to control that. But when coming to object oriented programming, we can define our own class. Within the class we can decide which are the functions has to be called. So right now, as a if you're taking an example like a banking industry, there are two type of humans we can see. One is the employee, the other one is a customer. So employee can able to should access only employee related information, and customer can able to access only customer related transactions. Now you can see there are some details of the customer Amarnath and account number, branch is Amarpet and Hyderabad. And what are the functions he can do means either he can deposit the money or he can withdraw the money or he can do some kind of balance transfer, bank transfer activities he can do. So an employee, what he can do is as employee Giri, his employee ID so and so, his designation is manager, and his salary so and so. What he can do is he can able to view the net salary or he can able to do some kind of view of the customer information, but not all the information, may not be, maybe few. So these are the two functions what he can do. What is happening means when I coming to procedural programming, since these are the functions, customer can able to view employee functions and employee can able to view customer functions, or they can able to do some kind of activity. There is no control. But by using object oriented programming, excuse me, I have a control where customer can able to access only customer related functions and employee can able to access only employee related functions. Is it clear what I'm trying to say?
Somewhat.
So that is one example why I'm going for object-oriented programming. It is not meaning that if I know object-oriented programming, I can able to complete my data analytics. Few functions I have to go with object-oriented programming. Few activities or few tasks which is assigned to me, I can complete with the help of procedural programming. It is your responsibility, which is going to be better better method. The best examples are when I'm going to be interact with my web, or when I'm interacting with my GUI where I have some kind of authentication, then I prefer to go with I not prefer I have to go with the OOPS concept. But when I'm doing data analytics concepts, most of my data analytics concepts can be completed with the help of procedural programming. May not be required OOPS concept unless until if I want to give some kind of classes, my own classes, which is not available. But unfortunately, we have 89,000 plus classes already available, so those are good enough to complete your task. Now, in this current example, what I have the snap here, how many variables we have? How many variables? I'm not talking whether it's a global variable, local variable, static variable, non-static variable. I'm not talking about it. How many variables we have. So the right hand side, global variables we have customer name, account number, branch, address, employee name, employee ID, designation, and salary. Total 8 global variables we have. What in my global variable did we discussed? Static variable, non-static variable, global variable, local variable. Eminent Giri, did we discussed or not? When a variable is outside of your class or a method within the program, we call it as a global variable, right?
Yes, Amar.
So total 8 global variables we have here, and by using this data, nothing but variables are nothing but data only, we are doing some kind of function or methods. So the collection of data and methods, you are doing some kind of activity. So but what is happening means employees can access customer functions and employee functions, and customer can also access customer functions and employee functions. So this may lead to security issues. So this scenario we recommend to go for OOPS concept. So what are the functions are tagged to employee? What are the functions are tagged to customer? To understand that. So when you say OOPS concept, there are 4 features we have it, which we need to understand in OOPS. So OOP is nothing but object-oriented programming. Features of OOP is encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, and polymorphism. So these are the 4 concepts are a part of, or you can say features of your OOP. We need to understand each and every feature in detail to, if you want to be understand the object-oriented programming. So the above object-oriented programming principles provide security, flexibility, and reusability. So the major thing is security, and we can able to have flexibility to like a plug and play, and reusability also is the same code I can able to repeat in different class. So I can define my own class and I can write my own methods and functions, that class I can able to use it in different class wherever I required. So Giri written one class, nothing but class security related code he written for 100 lines. The same 100 lines, instead of doing the copy paste, what Yamini can do is Yamini is going to be refer the Giri's code in a single line, so that the futures whatever you have in the Giri's on all 100 lines will be inheritance to Yamini, so that Yamini also have the similar functionality like security. So the reusability concept we have it, inheritance we have it. So in Java, the developer is forced to write a program using OOPS principles only. So that is a condition when I come to Java. There is a drawback. So he has to write by using OOPS concept. But we cannot develop an application without OOPS in Java. But in Python, it's not like that. You have a procedural language, and you also have OOPS concept. So it's up to you how what kind of method you want to, the approach you want to take it. But in Python, we can write programming using procedural oriented programming, whatever you learned so far. Or you can go with OOPS. So you have both the options. Choose based on the requirement. So when you want to become as a data analytics, most of your problems can be solved with the help of procedural, and few problems you have to go with OOPS concept. So when you say there are 4 features in OOPS concept, the first one is encapsulation. So encapsulation is nothing but combining data and methods. So what is what data means? It can be any data like global variable, local variable, static variable, non-static variable. All type of data is nothing but data only. Methods are nothing but your functions or methods or classes, everything. The functionality is what you can do. In my previous example, the customer functions are nothing but my methods, and data is nothing but global variables in the current example what I'm trying to show. So encapsulation is nothing but combining the data and methods. Why we need to combine the data and methods means every application has some data and operations. So data represented by using a variable and operations represented by using a functions or methods. Hope you're clear. We'll see some couple of examples on encapsulation. So customer example, we discussed about customer example. So customer is nothing but data. All are global variables what I defined here, and customer operations are nothing but functions. I have some functions, DEF, deposit, and I'm giving demat, deposit amount, pass, and withdraw, W amount, pass. Why I'm giving pass means I don't want to write anything within the function. So without, should not supposed to give any error. So I just use a pass function. When you use a pass function, system assumes that there is no code or there is no information within the function. Just it will be come out without showing an error. So DMAT, WMAT, D account, TMAT are the local variables to the representative functions. So in the previous procedural programming, I used to enter some number like x or y or a or b within the when you're writing any function. Those are nothing but local variables. So that amount is going to be there for your deposit. So C name, C address, C balance are nothing but global variables which are accessed by all the functions. So D amount is accessed can be deposit. W amount is going to be accessed by only the function called withdraw. D account number, T amount is going to be accessed by your transfer only. I cannot able to use T amount in a withdraw. That because that is a local variable can be accessed by only the particular function. But C name, C account number, C address, C balance are the global variables can be accessed by any one of these functions. How can I know how to differentiate local variables, global variables? When a variable is outside of your function but within your script are the global variables, and the variables are maintained within your function, we call as a local variables. You can see here deposit in bracket DAMT. Any questions? How to write a global variable, how to write your local variables? I think I already explained you this long back.
Yes, sir.
In the same script, assume that this is nothing but IDLE, the Python script. I also have another 4 more global variables: e name, employee name Giri, EID, e-salary, e-address. And I have a couple of 3 more functions: def tax, def HR, def PF. Now, don't you think that the customer name data Amar can access tax, because all the 7 functions or 6 functions are within the same program, so I can access my tax or I can access my HRA as an employee, right? As a customer also I can able to access. So syntactically it's correct, but logically, business logic, it's wrong. So to avoid that, we are going to depend on our oops concept. Encapsulation is fine, data and methods, but it is not going to be support my requirement, my business logic. Customers supposed to be access only the first 3 functions. Employee is supposed to access only the next 3 functions: tax, HR, and PF. So the same thing I given here as a theoretical concept. Encapsulation is a procedure of grouping or binding the related data along with the functions. It's called encapsulation. Encapsulation is implementing by using a class function. Let's see how it works. What is class? A class is a structure which binds the related data along with the methods. A class is a collection of variables and methods, similar like your encapsulation. Data is represented by variables and operations are represented by methods. In a class, 2 type of variables we have: static variable and non-static variable. Till now we discussed about global variable and local variable, but now we are discussing about static variable and non-static variable. Syntax of the class. The syntax is going to be class, class name, and you have a document string. Document string is nothing but what exactly the class is going to be represent, what the class contain, how the behavior of the class, some information. For user perspective, we are going to be write it. It is an optional. So for example, class security. So I can write security related program so that the next user, next developer who is going to be see that program, he can understand, okay, these 100 lines are related to security. So it is trying to give some kind of document string, says about the functionality of the class. And the dotted lines which I mentioned here, nothing but data and methods. Static variable are the variables which are outside of your class and within the program. And non-static variables are similar like your local variables within the function, within the class itself. Let me show you detailed examples. All above statements within the class should be follow an indentation. That is a mandatory thing. So you can see here the class name and document string also I have 4 spaces, and all the methods or functions or data whatever you have it are maintained 4 spaces indentation. A class consists of the following: document string, variables, static variable, non-static variable, and methods. So these are the things the class contains. Any questions?
No,
Is it clear? Now my requirement is, by taking example of the same global the customer and employee, what I'll do is I'll create 2 different classes. One is a customer class, second is the employee class. So in the customer class, I'll define 4 variables called customer name, customer account number, customer branch, and customer address, followed by 3 different classes, 3 different functions I'll create. Where if I come to employee class, I'll define 4 different variables: employee name, employee ID, designation, and employee salary, and 2 different functions I'll create. Now you can see here. So class name called customer, and 4 variables and 3 different functions. So customer group consists of the data, nothing but variables such as customer name, customer address, account numbers, customer balance, and the functions are nothing but methods like deposit, transfer, and withdraw. I'll binding the relative functions and relative variables are nothing but data under one class. So you can see the class name. Oh, sorry, the customer class customer. Now all these functions and the variables I'll maintain under data lines. So my variables, 4 variables and 3 functions comes under one bind called class customer. Going forward, by using a class function, I can control only these 3 functions has to be executed by using 4 static variables called customer name, customer address, account number, and customer balance. And the deposit cannot be accessed by employee name. The reason is employee has 4 different functions, but employee belongs to another class called employee. So I just separated like different folders. Any questions? Giri and Amni.
No,
Now, since I separated by class my data and methods, so customer variables can be accessed by customer methods only, but not by employee methods. Similarly, employee data can be accessed by employee methods, but not by customer methods. So when you say class, we need to understand one more concept called object within the class actually. So when you want to be call this class, customer class or employee class, before going to a example, we need to understand one more concept called object. An object is an instance of class. A class is a collection of similar objects. We can create n number of objects for a class. Each object will have its own copy of variables and methods. Example. So if I want to call an employee class, or if I want to call a customer class, I cannot call directly the class employee or a customer. So I need to create an object. With reference of an object, I can able to call the class. So it's nothing but instance for your class object. Object is nothing but instance of the class. So right now you created, assume that you created employee class. And now by giving a user input, you requested you're asking a user to enter some employee ID. So employee ID, the user has been entered and it's saved to EID. Similarly, employee name is saved to ename. Employee salary, when user entered some, sorry, when a user entered salary, it is into salary. Now you want to calculate some tax based on the salary, and you want to find out what is the PF for the customer employee. So you have some tax function, tax method, and PF method. So within the tax, you have some couple of lines of syntax, how the system is going to be calculated 10%, 20%, 30% slabs. And similarly, when it comes to PF, you have PF calculation, maybe 10% slab straight away or 8%, whatever it may be, depend on the need. Now, once you have these two functions, you need to call this employee class for my requirement purpose. So if I want to call, I need to create an object, E1 or E2. So how to create means E1 equal to EMP. If I able to call this one, then the object, the class, whatever I have it will be referred to your E1. Similarly, E2 equal to employee, E3 equal to employee, E4 equal to employee. So how many times the number of objects I can create n number, but the reference class is going to be single. employee, 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 and the number of methods you want to call for each object we need to be decided. Whether I need to call a pass, a tax, or I need to call a PF, or I need to call view, or what are the functions you have within the employee. All the functions I need to decide. So every object, it has its own data from the employee and its own methods. What are the methods you want to be called for each object? You can decide it. Are you getting what I'm trying to say?
Yes, sir.
Giri?
Master.
Now, when you're going detail, what in by static variable, what in by non-static variable. We know what in by local variable and global variable. So there are 4 variables you can see in Python totally. One is a local variable, global variable, static variable, and non-static variable. Static variables are variables which are defined within the class and defined outside of the methods. So global variables are outside of your methods itself. In a script, when you're writing any Python script, irrespective of your function or methods or libraries, you're just defining amar equal name equal to amar. So that is a global variable. So no, not within the function, not within the library, not within the method or something. But when it comes to static variable, you are defining this variable within the class, but outside of your functions, like a def tax, def pf. So these are the functions or methods I created. So, but the variable is created under class. That means class employee name equal to Amar. So within the class I created name equal to Amar, but outside of my function, so we call it the static variable. Are you getting my point? Now you can see an example. Class sample. I just defined my own class. Within the class, you can see indentation. I have it x equal to 10. So it is this x equal to 10. X variable behave like a static variable. The reason is this x has been defined within the class outside of my function. Are you clear? Now I created one method called def m1, a new method I created, print sample.x. So whenever you want to call this x variable, static variable, you have to prefix with the class name. So print sample.x. So the system, you can understand this x variable is part of your class function called sample, and the data whatever I have in x, it has to be printed. Do not encourage by giving only print of x. That will give an error. So you have to prefix with the class name. So sample.x. If you have class name as some other name, then some other name.x. Every variable has some properties. So even static variable has some properties. Data which is common for all the objects, then it is recommended to represent by using a static variable. So I have different objects, object 1, E1, E2, E3, and up to En. So when you feel that data is a standard and it's a static, it cannot be changed for object to object, then recommended to give as static variable. For an example, Yamini, Amar, and Giri are Telugu guys. So then give a regional language or native language equal to Telugu, which is not changing at all. Then give mother tongue equal to Telugu, which is a static variable. But Yamini can speak only English, Giri can speak only Tamil, Amar can speak only Telugu. This scenario, it's a dynamic. It's not a static or constant to everyone. It's not a common feedback we are getting from everyone. So what we can do is we'll maintain as non-static variable. So object to object, the word has to be changed. All employees whom I'm accessing right now, or whom I'm doing the data analytics, or belongs to TCS, or all the employees belongs to IBM. The common is IBM only, right? It's not changing at all. So make it as static variable. So how many objects you create, the employee working location cannot be changed. The company is cannot be changed. Are you getting my point? But employee name cannot be static. My name is different to Giri's name. Giri name is different to Amini, and Amini name is different to Amar. So employee name can be non-static variable, but the variable which is not going to be changed, the data, is should be static variable, which is recommended method. Is it clear what I'm trying to say? When you have a common one and cannot be changed frequently, keep it as static variable. So bank name, for example, I'm working with one banking site. All the customers who are accessing the banking site, they belong to SBI only. So bank name can be static variable. Withdrawal amount can be non-static. So data which is changing from one object to other object, then use non-static variable. Example, employee name. The customer names are changing, customer IDs are changing, and designations can be changed. So all these things, designation, employee ID, and employee names are changing. So those things comes under non-static variable. For a static variable, only one memory is allocated. Why we are differentiating like a static variable? Why we are differentiating as a non-static variable is whenever coming to web applications, generally there will be a huge amount of data is processing between interactions between customer and backend system. So to allocate the memory for a static variable, it is taking only one time. One memory it's going to be allocated for one data, nothing but ID, which we discussed in the long back. But when I come into non-static variable, for each object, for the same variable, it will be assigned a different memory. So if you have 100 objects, 100 times the memory is going to be allocated. Just imagine if I have millions of objects, how much memory it's going to be allocated. So, but when I come to static variable, when you know it's going to be related to SBI, why do you represent SBI for every employee? Or why do you represent SBI for all the customers? They are opening SBI site, so it's supposed to be SBI only. So allocate the memory only once by representing as static variable. If you're not representing as static variable, it will take it as a non-static variable. We have to take it as a non-static variable. So every time when you're doing an interaction, one object, then automatically one memory is going to be allocated. It may lead to performance issue at the final when you're doing the deployment. So a static variable can be accessed by all the methods in that class or by another class. So I have a bank name called SBI. I created this SBI static variable under class called employee. The same bank name I can also call, instead of creating a new one called SBI, I can call to another class called customers. So single memory can be shared to multiple classes. A static variable always be accessed by using a class name from within the class or from outside of the class. So right now, when I want to give a print, I have to prefix with the class name. Class name here in the current example, sample, class sample. So sample is the class name, sample.x. And when I'm calling the same static variable in another class called sample1, then also I have to prefix with class name.x. If I'm not giving class name.x, system cannot understand that. Any questions on this? How the syntax works for static variable means class is the function to define your class sample x equal to 10 and y equal to 20. Right now x equal to 10 and y equal to 20 within the class and outside of your methods. So we treat as a class static variables. And after that I'm defining my own methods def display print sample.x and sample.y. Any questions?
Over.
No. Now, what is the difference between I sometimes are using functions. If I'm going back and see, when I was using explaining the procedure programming, I used def, and I mentioned it is a function. But right now, I'm using a terminological method. Then, what is the difference between this? Is there any difference you find out in the syntax? Just think. There also use def only for defining a function, but when it comes to class, within the class, when I'm using def, I'm using a terminology called method, but not a function. Don't say that both are same. Both are different. I'm using two different terminology for the same concept called function called def. When it comes to procedural programming, I use a function, but when I'm coming to object-oriented programming, I'm using a method. If you practiced, there is a slight difference between those two, functions and methods. What is that? Any idea? When I explained you procedural programming functions, did I use self function within the bracket self? Did I used it?
No.
But here I'm using.
Self means
So
we are assigning to the object instance of the object.
correct. So the object instance, because of that object address. So object holds some address. That object address has your methods and variables. That address is going to be passed to your display here. That is the reason we call it as a method. But when it comes to procedural programming functions, we don't require to maintain a self. System automatically consider your address. But in a class, it's not like that. We are calling the class with the reference of your object only, the instance of object, and that object address. When I'm using an address or an object, so when you're referring employee 1 equal to employee class, employee 2 equal to employee class, employee 3 equal to employee class, that means employee 1, employee 2, employee 3 has a different addresses and different data. So that employee 1 address will be passed to display, and that within that display, what are the statements you have it, that will be executed. And when I say employee 2 object, that instance address will be called to display, and within the display whatever you have, it will be executed. So self is going to be help you to pass the address from object to your method. So there is a difference between function method. Function will be defined outside of the class, and method will be defined within the class. A method is called always by using an object. It is not going to be called without an object, but function can be called without an object. Function is normally without any object. That's the thing what I explained you. For a thumb rule, when you have a self, that is a method. When you don't have a self, that is a function. And the best example is another thumb rule is, if you're using a def outside of your class, then that is a function. Within the class, that is going to be a method. Any questions? And every method have self option, but when I come into function, you'll not have self, because no need to be called with reference of object. Directly you can call it. Any function you could directly call, but methods are not like that. It has to be called by with reference of your object. So you're going to use self. Any questions?
No, Amar.
So just I created the same class name. I'm giving a document string. Document string is nothing but what this class about. So display x and y variables. So that is nothing but document string. So x equal to 10 and y equal to 20. So these x and y variables are created within the class and outside of method. So we call this a static variables. Def display. So this method is going for display purpose. Now within the display, I have two concepts: print x variable and print y variable. Since these are static variables, always I have to be prefixed with class name. So print sample.x, print sample.y. Now class is completed. End of the class. To access the class numbers, nothing but methods or variables, we require to have an object. As I explained you, object is an instance to your class. So object creation statement or syntax is going to be object name equal to class name. So in my example, since class is sample is nothing but a class name, so on my object I'm just giving a variable called s1. S1 equal to sample. S1 equal to sample. So what exactly I'm doing is to generate an ID and pass my ID number to my def or something. My methods are to call my functions, class functions. I'm going to use the object because object is going to be my instance. So s1 equal to sample. So object creation statement, object created internally and its object address is taken to the Python interpreter and returns the indirect address of the indirect address of the object, and indirect address is stored in a variable called reference variable called s1, nothing but object name. So my address, sample address is going to be stored in s1, the indirect address. Now I need to call a method called display within the object called sample. Now s1 dot display. When I use this one, what is happening means we are going to get an error because s1 has an indirect address. That address has to be passed to display, and my expectation is to be display sample.x and sample.y. But right now def display is nothing but a function, it's not a method because there is no self option here. Are you getting my point? So I used self option again, just modified it and used self option. So the address whatever I have, indirect address of the sample, will be passed to display because in my last statement s1.display is there. So I'm calling a method called display. So my s1 indirect address will pass to display, and since it's a self option, the address will be passed here, and print sample.x and sample.y. So the sample.x is 10, sample.y is going to be 20. So the same thing got displayed here. Any question? Giri and Amni?
No, ma.
Now a couple of more examples we'll discuss in tomorrow's class from the TC1. We have a lot to cover. Maybe another 1 week it will take for object-oriented programming. Then we'll jump to different concepts.